All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll be starting in T minus 2 minutes. So we'll be just waiting for other participants and attendees to dial in, and then we'll start the event right away. All right. And as promised, we're going to start 2 minutes after 8 p.m. So, again, thank you, everyone, and making it in our first Product PH event of the year. So this is titled Product PH Community Talks. So the aim of this is to actually reach out and talk to those product managers in the Philippines, and whoever has attendees in whichever part of the world you are. So I see we have a couple of non-Filipino, non-local participants here. So we welcome you to our talk for tonight. So yeah, just a quick background on what we're gonna be doing tonight. We'll be having lightning talks. So we're gonna have 5 of them, and then we'll have a Q&A portion towards the end in the form of a lean coffee. But we'll be collecting your questions as we go along on the lightning talks. So, and that said, so we're gonna be using the Slido. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with it, but you can go to the site sli.do and put in the code number 7741565. Right? Or you can just scan the QR code if you want, if you're in the mobile phone. All right, and hopefully everyone is able to access Slido questions for today, and I'll be passing over to Abel. By the way, my name is Grasel Dunca, or you can call me Gra. I forgot to introduce myself. So, and I'll be passing over to Abel to show us what will be our first question of the night before we start the lightning talks. Over to you, Abel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Or at least on our side of the world. Good evening. I hope you've had a great day, and I hope you all have some energy to participate in some of our questions and activities. So for our first question for the night is, what brings you here today? So if you head over onto Slido, you could submit your answers here and we could quickly go through them. So yeah, I hope you were able to join. So we have a test here, but please submit your answers and we'll go through them. So learn from Product PH. All right. What else? Well, for me personally, I'm here to, well, as an organizer of the event, definitely. And also to learn a bit more about product management in the space. So we're getting a bit more answers here, experiences to learn from, lightning talks, meet other people. Definitely, uh, a lot of people have been joining these events to definitely learn and build their network, right? So to learn from peers. I think that's the biggest answer, right? Or the most voted one. How about you, Gracel? What brings
Yeah,
you
I
here
mean,
today?
actually, this will be my first time for the year. So I look forward into hearing stories actually. So apart from meeting people, I want to learn or I want to hear their stories and also what are their experiences and hopefully also learn from them.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of us here are looking to learn and definitely to network. So I suggest that you stay active and you participate in the polls. This will be the main interaction for our event tonight. So keep on answering and we'll definitely learn a lot from our speakers today. So with that said, I think I can pass back to Gracel.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks for that, Abel. So right, yeah. So a lot of folks here are here to learn, to know about experiences with one another, and of course, learn from our speakers. And before we go to our first speaker, so you may be wondering what we'll be talking about tonight. So, as mentioned in the banner, in the meetup photo, so we want to measure the success of a new product feature. So this will be and we'll be mostly talking about product metrics. How do we actually measure it? From which perspective, etc., etc. So I hope you keep your eyes peeled, and I hope you lend us your ears to our dear speakers, so that in any case we want to bring you some new knowledge and new learnings from this event. And of course, don't forget to post your questions in the Slido link, uh, the earlier link we use. So it's open. It should be open for questions. So we'll be talking about them towards the end of this session. All right. And I can probably send it over to our first speaker. So just a bit of a background to our first speaker. So he's a very dear friend of mine. I met him back in 2018 when I worked in BGC. So he's now a Scrum Master on a consulting company in Hong Kong. And yeah, take it over, Richard.
All right, thanks, Ga. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I don't think
Not yet.
so.
Oh, okay. How about now?
Yep.
Yep.
Good.
All right. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone in the call. My name is Richard, and tonight I would like to talk to you guys about the data-driven product owner. And for the longest time, in the past 7 years of my experience working with Scrum teams, product owners, and organizations, this is something that I've started to learn about and started to advocate for a lot of reasons. And a lot of them is to help to make better data-driven decisions so that our product owners are able to maximize the delivery of value to the product. And in this maximization, we are able to emphasize the value of the product into the hands of the customer, to the eyes of the stakeholders, to the society, to the environment, and to our organization. And using this data, we are also able to provide knowledge to our developers and Scrum teams so that they can work in a sustainable pace and they are focusing their efforts on the right things. So when we're talking about this goal that we have of being able to make data-driven decisions, what does the market look like actually from a global perspective? What we're seeing is, based on the State of Product Management report from 2021, there are over 2,000 product owners responded to the survey. 64% of them said that their product teams have metrics, primary success metrics and business metrics to be their primary success indicators. And 35% of them wish they have a clearer purpose and company strategy. So you notice that there is a disconnect between these two. And I think there's still room for improvement in making sure that the product people are getting consensus on product direction, using metrics as the cornerstone for these kind of conversations with each other, with stakeholders, with developers, with the organization as a whole. So just to give an insight as well, try to think about these metrics that you guys are using today. How are you understanding how your teams are delivering against value rather than activity, and understanding what kind of business metrics you might be using today to have that conversation. Some of the speakers of tonight's talk might be able to provide further insight on some of these metrics from a business and product perspective. So the reason why we also talk about this is that thinking about the teams, thinking about the work that you guys are doing, thinking about the last 2 years that we've had and experienced, data has been a central point in providing this clarity on what we want to achieve, how quickly can we achieve it with the people that we have, with the resources and available information that we have. And so we want to make sure that we have the appropriate options that you can look at when we are trying to do the right work for our teams, for our stakeholders, for our customers, for our organization. So when we're thinking about options, we have about 4 of them. And these are some of the things you can start to think about when we are starting to work. So first is understanding how much value your product has produced to date. Learning about what key product metrics your stakeholders are trying to understand is crucial, and how soon you need to be making an impact on those. What best describes also your customers' behaviors that affect these product metrics, so that you can now formulate how to introduce these later on. The next thing is understanding how much value your product needs to produce with how much budget or people you have to work on your product. This is now being able to have that level of comparison between feature A and feature B, making those small bets or big bets that you need to do, and understanding what are the factors that influence the value of the new feature that your product is trying to produce. Conversations around this would also be able to put the stakeholders accountable to what they're trying to pursue. If the conversations around do A versus B comes in, at the very least, there is a dollar value or a business value or product value that they can attach that at least helps the conversations become a bit easier, because there becomes a consensus on what becomes the first thing that you need to do. Next is understanding how much time it takes for your organization to deliver value. Is it, what are the things that will contribute to how soon you can release to the market or release to a customer that can provide feedback that, yes, this will return this much amount of value? What are the things that will prevent the flow of value to happen? Is it the number of people who can work on it, the scope that the value or the feature you're trying to create? If you pare down the scope, will the value remain high? And can your organization have that conversation around, we will accept that we will take this long in order to get out the door, or can we have that and still get out the door sooner and still continue building upon the success of the earlier feature and create more value. And understanding your historical data will be useful in this regard. And then last option that you could think about would be to understand what are the things that impede or block the flow of value for your team. So understanding those factors will affect your time to market. It will affect your value that the new feature will come out. Because, for example, if you anticipate, if the feature is time sensitive and you can't get it out the market sooner, and someone goes out the door sooner than you are with a better implementation, and because you were blocked by certain factors such as hardware availability, people availability, the quality of the decisions being made, the scope of the work, and so on and so forth, make sure that you guys understand what are those factors, so that you can either escalate them to your leadership. We need help with this. We can escalate to what are the practices that are preventing you from getting out the door sooner. You can think about the things that are becoming wasteful, like if there are too many approvals that are happening, and for a feature that will be given to just one customer, for example. So there are those things that if you can be able to communicate effectively how much value is lost or is potentially being missed as a result of these things, then I think, and gain consensus on what's the next thing that we need to do as an organization to support you as a product owner trying to deliver features for the product, valuable features for the product, at least you have that conversation. And then lastly, for my last slide, the way forward that we could do. So we talked about the options. There were 4 of them, and these are somewhat related to them. So when we're thinking about ways forward, one of the options is to visualize and make decisions based on how much value your product has produced today. Make sure that in every review, in big bold letters, you show how much has your product produced today. And make sure that everyone who is affected by this product from an organization standpoint knows about it, down to the developers who are producing the feature, all the way to the stakeholders that care about the product's success. Make sure that the value is understood and how they're impacting on it from a sprint to sprint or month on month or quarterly basis. So that when you start talking about the factors that affect the value of the product, then you can now either go to time, either go to people, go to the impediments, go to the decisions, and go to the value of the new features. So this is a very foundational thing. Visualizing and making decisions. Next is the practice of making trade-offs based on how much new value your product needs to produce. So I was alluding to this a bit earlier when we were talking about, do we do feature A versus feature B? And you can't do this if you don't have an ability to put a value onto your new feature. If you don't have the discipline to work with your stakeholders to say, hey, we have these 2 features, which one has more value to who? And who do we serve right now as far as our goals are concerned? And once you have that information, that makes it this easier to make those types of decisions, because number 1, there's consensus, and number 2, you have a value to point at based on your goals. That makes experimentation easier as well, because now that those conversations have taken place and there is consensus. There should be some consensus into what decisions are being made on the ground. This is where making small bets comes in, making sure that we are creating something with the least amount of effort and the least amount of time. And what those trade-offs are is either scope, functionality that can be delayed, or functionality that will build on top of each other. So if you were thinking about creating an application to validate a bet that you're making out there, then you could probably have a bigger picture view of what you need to do. but at the very least, you have a foundational thing that's out the door, and you start building out on top of it. So that's where your hypothesis templates come in. These are where your canvases could come in to provide a picture for that feature, and compare it against the others to see if they are matching or aligned with the goals of your organization. So, and this is where working with your stakeholders and leaders in shortening the time it takes for your organization to deliver value becomes crucial. So it's where scope management comes in, trade-offs comes in, looking to deliver more than once a sprint or iteration comes in. That small changes into the feature of the product or to the product itself, it could be hidden through A/B testing or through feature flags, in order to make sure that the quality remains high, that you're able to test it in the market as soon as possible. You can get your UX people to take a look at it from the customer's perspective and gain that feedback, and be able to determine, do we need to refine it even further because there are fundamental flaws on the product, or it's good enough to get money off of it already and get some return and validate that it's actually useful for the problem that we're trying to solve for the customer. So any conversations around shortening the time it takes will be very beneficial for you. Next is working with leaders to solve for the things that are impeding the blockage of flow for your teams. So like I mentioned earlier, if there are approvals that need to be consolidated or be placed within the abilities of the Scrum team, good. If there are dependencies that you need to be eliminating, work with your Scrum Master and the organization to mitigate for those dependencies. Move the people that are causing those dependencies to be part of the Scrum team and get that out the door as soon as possible. If it's defects, think about triages, think about escape defects that are actually affecting the customer. Prioritize those over the ones that are still within the view of the organization, because the ones that are being seen by your customer might be costing you money. And so these are the things that might be blocking your flow or impeding the flow of value. So these are some things that you could potentially work on. And lastly, one of the things that we are starting to learn about and starting to hope to implement for a lot of other organizations in the future is called evidence-based management. This is something that came out of Scrum.org in the past few years, talking about a data-driven approach that will take into account several key value areas that are specific to a few of the things that we've already mentioned. So it's like their current value, the new features or unrealized value, your time to market, and your ability to innovate. These 4 factors are defining certain measures that you can now take a look at and be able to make data-driven decisions that will affect not only your product, but also your organization. If you're interested more about evidence-based management, there are a lot of trainers out there who are providing this information. Also, Agile for Humans, if you search for that in YouTube, they have free training material on EBM. So given this, so thank you very much for listening, and I hand it over back to Russell.
All right, thanks for that very insightful talk, Richard. All right, so yeah, I'm very interested in knowing more about evidence-based management, or EBM. So me myself, I've been also learning about it as well. But yeah, my takeaway from Richard's talk is to have data be exposed and be out there to have meaningful conversations. All right. So yeah, and since we have a long way to go still, I'll hand it over to Jess for our next lightning talk. All right, Jess.
All right. Hello. So my lightning talk is about measuring your product success with the limited time and resources that you have. It's going to be centered about how you're going to coordinate with the business, to help empower you and the rest of the team. So, okay, here we go. I'm Jess. I'm the lead product manager of Edamama. Just so you guys know, Edamama is a venture-backed e-commerce platform and one of the fastest growing startups in the Philippines. So if you're a mom right now and you have a kid that's maybe under the age of 10, it's likely that you've been targeted by our ads. And I'm kind of excited to meet some of you who may have known about us for quite some time. So I'm going to give you a bit of context about who I am and what I do in Edamama, because I think it's very key that you understand the context of where I'm coming from. So I started working at Edamama when it was only like 20 or 30 strong. I was the only product manager and I was working with 2 developers. That's how lean it was. And the only metric that we had to pay attention to at that time was the number of orders placed and the number of customer registrations. Like that's the only thing that we really cared about because we were a startup and all that mattered was to get the interest. So from that very humble beginning of, just me being the sole product manager, me being the QA, me being the project manager, me being the lead designer, it was very, very lean. And now 2 years later, we're now a strong team in tech and product of around 40 people. We handle hundreds and hundreds of orders a day where it's no longer a metric that I have to closely look at. Number of customers are also thousands and thousands of customers that it's just, it's very humbling to be very excited to have the first person order on your site. And now it's just a large number of people. So that's where I started. And I think it would really, benefit all of you listening to this team, like how I was able to leverage the business as well when it comes to measuring product success. So one of the key things is that you have to understand the terrain, like where you're working for, where you're working, what you're working on, what kind of structure the business has, who you're working with, what kind of stakeholders are interested in your product. Because when you look at all these startups, when you look at all these companies here in the Philippines, one thing I am very confident in saying is that no 2 product teams are the same. Someone in startup X would have a different way of managing a product than someone on handling startup Y. So that is a fact of life. And all of these things that you read about measuring the success and whatnot, all of these are applicable. At the end of the day, they're theory. You take what applies, you take what would provide value, and sometimes you have to leave the rest at the door. So it's being very, very discerning about what applies to, again, the business that you're handling, to the people that you work with, and the metrics that you want to influence. So what comes with understanding the terrain is understanding your strengths as well. What kind of a product manager are you? So truth be told, I know I'm conducting a talk here about understanding the product metrics. I'm not being data-driven is not my strong suit. Like I know that's one of the weaknesses that I have as a PM. But I do understand that my strengths lie in collaboration, communication, and the ability to pivot whenever needed. So those are my strengths. And because I know that collaboration is my strength, I can lean on to the rest of the business as well when it comes to deciding what metrics are we measuring. So the structure of the business, I know some of you may be product managers in likely companies that manufacture, who have clients who request for products to be built. Some of you may be working in companies where the product is the business and the business is the product. So you have to also understand, like, okay, this is the type of company I work in. So, okay, this is what I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do. So just so you know, Edamama is a business where the product is the business itself. So I know how to handle that. And you have to look at what kind of influence do you have over the rest of the business and the product. Because when the business is the product, everything that you do, every feature that you put in impacts not only the customer, but also the day-to-day of someone working inside that business. So for example, if I choose to build a feature in Edamama that makes it possible for people to receive like their cash back upon delivery, I would also have to speak to operations and tell them that, hey, I'm going to put in a cashback feature. And what's very, very important in this feature is that you're able to tag whether or not the item is delivered on time. So then this gives people an extra load. So it's not just the customer that you're thinking of, you're also thinking about your coworkers. Sometimes when you put out a feature, it makes things harder for them, but sometimes it makes things easier for them. So you have to take note, is that the kind of business that I'm working with? Are those kinds of stakeholders that I'm working for? So once you understand the terrain that you have, one of the key things, so again, I'm speaking from the perspective of a company where the product is the business itself. So one of the things that you can do here when you're trying to use data to drive your decisions forward is aligning your metrics with your stakeholders. So because the business is the product, you do have business units or departments wherein their main KPI is directly influenced by the product that you handle. So for example, GMV contribution marketing is looking after that metric. That's where they're based. Add to cart sits with merchandising. Your NPS score, customer care handles that because that's where they're being that's what they're looking after. Same with UX. UX cares about the customer flow. So identify, okay, I can rely on these businesses to track the metrics for me, and I just have to keep in mind that whenever marketing says, "No, oh Jess, there's something up with our GMV, it's dropping this month. Can you investigate? Like, is that something product can influence or is it not?" So that's where you start to make decisions. Edamama is actually a very, very huge app. It's not just one flow, it's multiple giant features put together. So it's very, very important as well that you can rely on different parts of the business to give you that data and to tell you the truth about that data. And this is a key learning for me as well, that you always have to ensure that you're looking at the same data. Early on with me and Edamama, there was a time that I tried to track my own metrics. I used my own tool. I sat down and tracked everything and presented it to, the founder, like, hey, this is, I've decided that this is our GMV right now. And they go, but that's not marketing's data. So that's one of the key learnings that I've learned. Whenever you're looking at something, ensure that your stakeholders or other partners in the business are also, looking at the same thing. Because at the end of the day, you all want your product to succeed. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, if the product succeeds, the business succeeds. So with that said, again, just make sure that you're both looking at the same thing, because it makes it easier for people to buy in on the roadmap that you have. So just to share, my teams are divided into different metrics as well. I currently have 5 product teams, and each of these teams have their own PM. And each PM have a key metric tied to them. So I have a team that's looking after just retention. I have a team just looking after acquisition. I have a team looking at, conversion rate from add to cart, and even the team just focused on add to cart. So that's how we're structured right now. And because they know what metric they're supposed to influence, they also know which department they have to approach to get buy-in. So yeah. You all have probably seen this wonderful little Venn diagram of what the product manager does. So that's the point of my talk. You sit in the middle of UX, tech, and business. And just because you sit in the middle doesn't mean that you have to be stretched thin by all these other departments. It goes both ways. You help them, they help you out. At the end of the day, you all have to collaborate. At the end of the day, again, at the end of the day, my favorite phrase for the day, you all just want to succeed. And you all just have to talk to each other on what the best strategy is for you to succeed. Okay, so you sit in the middle, you leverage that space. You make sure that they all are communicating the same way. You're all aligned on, okay, for this quarter, we are going to fix this metric that has been in the red for a while. This metric, obviously, people are struggling at this part because, customer user flow would say people keep clicking on the wrong thing. So it's easy because UX has pitched that they have the data. So you're in the middle, make use of the middle. Okay. But yeah, time to market is still key. I know I'm the second speaker of this series. You will learn, I'm sure you will 100% learn how to identify what metrics to look at and what metrics to prioritize. But again, time to market is the key. Paren, the goal is to get your product out as soon as possible. Don't get too hung up on what you're supposed to be measuring. If you've done your research, if you've done like all the product scoping, if you've talked to all the stakeholders, if you've talked to your customers, as long as you have like high confidence rate that this feature will definitely move the needle, don't get too hung up that, oh, I forgot to track this, I forgot to track XYZ. All that you can add in ways to track that later, but time to market, again, 100% at the end of the day, most important thing. So yeah, that is my talk. So I wonder if I was able to do it on time. All right, perfect.
All right, thanks for that. Another insightful and very interesting talk, Jess. So yeah, time to market is key. So just to tie it back on the EBM or the evidence-based management from scrum.org, they actually talk about time to market over there. So if you're interested, I think Richard already sent over some of the links. All right. So moving on, we'll have Mr. Carlos Rivera talking about the heart. So, Mr. Carlos, please tell us more about the heart.
Hi, good evening. Wait, let me just share my screen. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for the past two talks. Actually, I resonated a lot with Jess, especially on how to divide the product teams and not to overthink tracking metrics. And it precisely brings it into my talk, where there might be a bit of a risk of overthinking the metrics, but we'll try to simplify it in maybe the best way I know how. So it's my talk is about metrics with the heart, using the heart framework to measure your product success. So heart is not puso in this context. It's more like it's an acronym actually. So it stands for happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. But anyways, before you get into the nitty-gritty, hi everyone, I'm Carlos. I'm a design researcher and strategist at heart. I'm currently working at Talino Venture Labs. So we're a venture builder for financial inclusion startups. Our most recent product was Bayani Pay. So it's a neobank for Filipino Americans. Currently, I'm the head of design research and CX strategy in Talino. Before I entered into Talino, I was the head of product at Require. My career has been from a UX researcher. So I started out as a UX researcher, UX strategist in Quickfire. I became head of product. And then when I transitioned into Talino, we work with a big portfolio of products. So I helped track the user experience, the metrics, doing usability testing, and tracking the overall brand experience and marketing of the product. So what my role now is to help all of the teams like business, marketing, product, and design come together and agree like what are the metrics we're tracking to improve our line of products. My work is kind of more of a consultant work. So I work across different product lines, and then we help establish what are the metrics we're supposed to be tracking. So yeah, it's a lot of breadth instead of depth. But anyways, I'll go into heart and how we use it in our product in measuring the impact of our products. So heart is a framework from Google. The heart framework is a methodology designed to bring a product team's focus more in line with customer experience. So it's kind of measuring the overall customer experience and to better understand how these changes can impact the user experience of a product. So it's kind of an overlap between customer experience and user experience. It looks like a lot, but we'll break down what heart is. But there's this saying before we enter into heart, it's kind of a way, heart is basically a way to track all your metrics. And I love this saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. So heart kind of gives that framework on showing everything that you can measure. So yeah, this is heart. Basically, it stands for happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. It's divided into 3 swim lanes: goals, signals, and metrics. So goals are basically what is it that you want your users to feel or do. Signal is what is that indicator that that goal has been accomplished. And metric is the quantifiable way of tracking that signal. And under each lane, you have happiness, engagement, adoption, and retention. So basically happiness, it's kind of how happy people are with your product, basically. Like, are they happy to use it? Is it easy to use? Is it helpful? Those are some metrics for happiness. Engagement, on the other hand, is, are people engaged with your product? So for social media, it's how long do people spend on the application? Or for example, YouTube, how long are people on a certain video? Adoption is if people see the value in your product or feature. So this is kind of where you measure your product's value proposition. So if you're a remittance product, are people using your product the way it's supposed to be using? Like, are they using the remittance feature often? Or are they even adopting to it at all? Retention, on the other hand, is, are people constantly using that value proposition that you're offering? So back to my example of a remittance product, if they remit, how many repeat users do you get for remitting, like every month, or does one user use it multiple times? So that's for retention. While as task success, it's more on how easily do people accomplish a goal. So are people able to accomplish the goal of your product or application? Are they able to do it without a lot of hitches? So those are things to measure. So with that being said, we go into signals. So signals are kind of like, if goal is, the goal is to have a user do something. A signal is, what is it that they do that indicates that that goal is accomplished. So for example, for happiness, if you want people to feel, if you're rating like your website and you want to know if people find your website easy to use or intuitive, or if it could be about their product experience as an overall, a signal that would indicate that people are happy with your product or website is the 5-star rating. So if you have the Play Store or the Apple Store, you can check the ratings on there. So a signal that people are happy with your product are those consistent ratings or that user feedback that people give. So you can even track it on social media if people are happy with your product or application. And a direct metric you can attach to that is a net promoter score, or NPS. So how likely are you to recommend your product to a friend? Customer satisfaction ratings. Those are examples of metrics that you can use. Engagement is, for engagement, a goal, like if it's social media, for example, like how long do people stay on the page? How long do they scroll? A signal for that is how much time people spend on an application. And a metric to track that signal is session length, session frequency. If you're doing a video streaming product, it could be like, how long are they on a video? Well, as for adoption, do people launch or download the application? Do they sign up for the account? Do they use this new feature? Like going back to our remittance product, do people actually like remit with the product? So do they download it? Do they actually use the remittance feature? A metric to track is how many people actually use that feature. So retention is, do people keep coming back for that? So a metric for retention, for example, for a remittance product again is repeat users per month. While as task successes, this usually comes out in usability testing. So when you work with your UX research teams, you can measure this easily. Like, are people intuitively able to get to the flow, understand the flow of the product that you're doing? And then you could use like the usability testing score, the PSSQ. You could even test it with your QA teams as well. Other than your UX research teams, you could also test it with your QA teams. Like, when this transaction happens on your platform, does it crash? Does it bug? So those are metrics that you can, and then a metric could be like task success, exit rate, and so on and so forth. It seems pretty overwhelming. I know it seems pretty overwhelming, but it's something that's really done in a collaboratively. So one is no need to overthink the metrics that you're putting onto it, but also the best way to work on aligning all these metrics is together with other teams, working cross-functionally. So one question about Heart was, can I use it? Because can you use Heart to evaluate on one feature versus the whole product? And the answer there is yes, you can. So I think this talk was about evaluating a product's new feature. So you can use it to evaluate the effectiveness of a new feature. And the thing about Heart is you don't have to use the whole Heart. It can be half-hearted, no pun intended. But for example, if you're doing a verification, you're gonna test a verification. You don't need to put engagement because people don't come back to engaging with like whatever, like KYC. They only do it once, right? So yes, you can more measure, do people find it easy to use? Can people accomplish it easily? Are people successful in onboarding? So you could use one or two instead of the whole Heart. So it's kind of just like Heart is kind of just like it's kind of like a map where you can put everything. So yeah, but and here's some key tips to remember when using Heart. So these are six simple tips. Heart can be applied from either the entire product or a single feature. You don't have to use the whole Heart as well. And not all categories have to be used to measure a feature. So you don't need to put all of the metrics there. It could either be like happiness or task success or adoption or retention, depending on what feature you're measuring or what your team decides to use. Metrics should be trackable when you measure. So what you can't measure, you can't manage. So try to make sure that if you're going to put a metric out there, it's trackable. The most important thing is also to align metrics with stakeholders. So there's no use in measuring something if it's not aligned. So you really do have to come up with your stakeholders. Like, I think I related a lot to what Jess said before, that when she was measuring for GMV, yun pala, they had a different marketing team, had a different number. With this being the case, when you're aligning metrics, you're not just aligning for product team itself or for UX team, you're aligning for like NPS is either marketing or customer service, right? Depending on your company. Those metrics do have to be aligned. So Heart is the overall customer experience or brand experience. So it never operates, the metrics never operate in a silo. So you have to align these metrics with stakeholders. In terms of practical implementation, working with UX and engineering teams to implement the metrics is going to be key. So the technical implementation is something that I think I've encountered the most difficulty with, actually. So I'll be on in Talino. What happens in Talino is we usually build the product, and then sometimes we attach the metrics later on. But by that time, engineering already has a backlog of like it might take us time to attach this metric or this to have this metric track because we have to install Google Analytics, GA4, or whatever tool we're using. So early on in when you're ideating a product or a feature, work with engineering and your UX research team so that plotting out the metrics or plotting out a way you can track the metrics is already in the consideration for engineering backlog. So they can put it in their sprint, they can put it in their workflow already. And also UX research teams, because there'll be constant testing on that product or feature that you're doing. So you need to work with them as well in knowing what are you going to test, when are you going to test it, who are the users who are going to test it. Everything down from all the implementation wise of how they do usability testing or discovery research. Heart is also best used in conjunction with a customer journey map. So one practice that I like doing that I brought from Quickwire that I'm trying to implement in Talino is using a customer journey map. And I feel like it goes very well with Heart because in Heart you track the overall brand experience. Customer journey map also you can map out the whole customer journey with your brand or with your product. So it's very, I find Heart good. Identifying the metrics to track for Heart is good to use in conjunction with customer journey map. So setting up a customer journey map, and then there you can find out what are the what metrics should I be tracking. So yeah, that's it for my talk today. Those are my key takeaways from Heart.
All right, thanks for that very hearty talk.
Yeah.
So
It's a lot of detail, yeah.
hopefully we can learn more about this in the future. And yeah, and now it's down to our last two speakers. And our fourth speaker will be Yana. So I'll just let Yana introduce himself and also his topic for tonight. Take it away, Yana.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen? Okay. So, I will do quick as much as possible. So, hi, my name is Yana. I'm a product manager at Toreta. It's a restaurant tech company in Japan. And my experience is I co-founded a startup. So before moving to the current company, I worked for the business. And also I'm a co-organizer of this community. And my recent focus is 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. So that's a field, and especially for B2B2C industry. So I want to introduce, especially for under this context. So to define failure can be an effective tool to evaluate success faster. The context. So our product, this is an example from my past. Our product is in short providing a financial benefit to employees, and we have a client, employer, and the user is admin, and end user, that's our employees. And we see the KPI. This is also an example, the monthly active user rate. And challenge. So we launched this product, and the first result when it comes to MAU rate, the client day, 5%. So we improved onboarding process after conducting customer interview. And then the following result is our client B 10% and the client C is 15%. So here is the question, is this percentage success or failure? Or until when we should keep getting more data for decision making? So this is my challenge. Our approach, whenever I have any challenge, which is especially that have a lot of uncertainty, I rephrase the question. So how can we fail? So I borrow the concept of OKRs. So define failure as objective and define key result for the failure. So example, so objective, we cannot reach to the target MAU rate. Maybe it should be the actual number. And the key result, this is an example, but our product doesn't provide value. It's useless. End users don't know the value. It's matter of promotion, maybe. Our product has issues on UX. This is the product side. Our expectation for KPI target is wrong. The last one is we don't recognize factors, new factors for failure. So when I listed up these key results, there are some approaches. Yeah, and I actually tried this approach, and this is the outcome. So we gained new insight from the planned activity. So client A, it was 5%. Their 5% because they have a problem start using our service in their existing company welfare. And client B, 10%. They are kind of similar. Client C, 15%. They're actually the better case. Early majority didn't recognize our service. So we haven't yet seen any product issue for this case. So for this result, we made improvement for our activity. So I thought about more like how I can model the penetration. So I borrow the concept of the chasm. So I set the KPI target before and after the chasm per client. So each client reach to the chasm and then go over for it and evaluate the actual what is happening. And this is just an example. I made a lot of more the activities, but what I want to say is even if we define the KPIs for success, under uncertainty, it's really hard to understand fast in the fast speed. So that's why there is a trick. So this is one of the way I use for such situation. So thank you.
All right. Yeah, that was literally a lightning quick talk.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope everyone learned about how that like failures are not necessarily bad, and hopefully we can learn a lot from them. And it's very interesting for me to see that approach to measure failures so that we can be more successful. So that's it. All right. So again, thanks, Yana, and I'll be handing it over to our last speaker, John. Right, take it away, John.
Thank you, Gressel. Yeah, I agree. Yana's talk was really lightning. So I'll try to do it as lightning as possible as well, if I can. Anyway, yeah, I hope you can see my screen right now. Yeah, so yeah, for those who stayed, thank you for staying all the way to the fifth speaker, which is myself. Yeah, I think most of the parts are already have been mentioned by Richard, by Jess, by Carlos, and by Yana. So I'll be trying to pick some key concepts in those talks and share you a story as we go along from one of my experiences as a product practitioner as well. So go or no go, presenting success indicators to key decision makers. So just a quick of an intro. So my name is John. I'm currently one of the product managers in WebFontaine, and I'm also a co-organizer here in Product PH. But The story that I'm going to share to you is not actually related to my current stint with Webfontaine, but rather with my role before I joined Webfontaine. So yeah, so prior to joining my current company, I was also formerly practicing product management in SCI Ventures. So SCI Ventures is one of the first fintech and blockchain startups here in the Philippines. And yeah, subsequently, I was also managing one of the acquisitions by this company called Cebuana Luwalier. Yeah, I'll tackle it later on. So my story revolves around presenting to decision makers. So as product managers, we are going through one iteration through another, whether in multiple features or multiple products. But there are some cases where, product managers don't make all the decisions. And there are cases in other organizations where there are other people who are actually, deciding on different levels of decisions. Now, the question lies, if there are other people who call the shots to decide whether you pivot or you persevere in a certain iteration, in a certain product feature or the entire product itself, how do you actually present valuable data to them? And how do you influence their decision as well? So as I mentioned, while working with SCI Ventures, at some point it was acquired by this company called Cebuana Luwalier. So Cebuana Luwalier is one of the biggest remittance companies and pawn shops here in the Philippines, with a vast network of brick and mortar shops all across the Philippines. So they got into an engagement with SCI Ventures and acquired a majority stake with the company. So with that, since I was the product head at that time, there were initial talks with them, and the first thing that they said to me was, at some point they said to me, "Hey, we want a mobile wallet." That's all they said. They didn't say anything. They didn't specify what exact feature do they want. Would it be something like Gcash or something the likes of Paymaya, or do you want to do into the crypto business such as coins? Nothing. They just said, we want a mobile wallet. So I was thinking to myself, okay, you acquired SCI for this amount, for X amount, just to have a mobile wallet. Like, I mean, I was thinking to myself, what the hell is that? Like, what should be our approach? I mean, come on, you can buy a mobile wallet from a third-party provider. Why do you need to, like, acquire a startup or Filipino company for that purpose alone? And yeah, we had to re-strategize and we had to take a step back, because at this point, there are certain users and there are certain products that SCI was managing. And at the same time, Cebuana was managing a couple of digital products as well on top of their brick and mortar business. So we had to work with their digital team and the team that we had in SCI to basically start from scratch and identify the different points where we should look at in order for us to achieve our goals. So the approach of the two teams was this. We started with Cebuana Luwalier. We were trying to identify what are the current strengths, what are the current lines of businesses, and yeah, basically, which are the best profit-making, revenue-generating businesses of Cebuana Luwalier. Then we looked into SCI Ventures. What were the strengths of SCI? At that time, it was really about crypto and remittance and having a digital wallet as well. But yeah, we had to lay it down and compare them side by side as well. Now, with these two different companies, we had to go into the current users that we had. So what we did was to host focus group discussions and to identify what are the market needs, both for Cebuana and for SCI Ventures as well. And with that, once we identified those things, we went into having some sort of design sprint where we tried to map out all the problems that we saw and tried to focus and understand those problems. We also sketched out the different solutions that we can come up with based on those problems and ideate. And from those ideations, we made decisions on which solutions can be testable and can potentially be part of the MVP. And as a fourth step, we try to make a realistic prototype, make a working prototype, I think. And lastly, go back to those users and test and get their feedback as well. So this process took about a good 2 or 3 months. So it's very time consuming, if you can imagine. And you know what the result was? Surprisingly, what we found out was it all went back to a mobile wallet. So yeah, we went back from trying to discover that, hey, it's not just a mobile wallet, but we actually went around the circle and went back and said, oh yeah, okay, we need a mobile wallet. But because we did that, we had a more focused direction towards identified user personas. We identified key pain points that users had, and we were able to identify which strengths both Cebuana Lulier and SCI Ventures had, and use those to come up with succeeding iterations for the product. Now, the challenge is, how do you communicate all of that, all of the metrics that you were able to measure, all of the insights that you were able to gain, and all the feedback that you had from your users? How do you communicate all of that back to your stakeholders who simply want a mobile wallet? So this was our approach as well. First one is to be on the same page. This is very key and very important as product practitioners. And if you're facing a board of their couple of people from the board of directors, or like a couple of investors that make key decisions, it is very important that you are on the same page. It is very essential to align your goals and objectives with those stakeholders. For example, in Cebuana, they have their brick and mortar business really booming, and that is really the bulk of their business. But what if they wanted to offload those brick and mortar business and transform it into digital, so that they can make more use of their actual brick and mortar locations? So obviously they are aiming for user acquisition, user conversion, and eventually retaining those users as well. But if in your mind you are actually wanting to monetize this mobile wallet right away, you think about, ad revenue, you think about transaction fees and whatnot. So that difference in goals for one stakeholder, like for example, for your stakeholders, a certain iteration might be successful, but for you, it might not be successful because you were looking at a different angle and you were looking at a different goal. So it is very important to first be on the same page. Second, identify and talk to your customers. Obviously, your customers are the key people that will use your product. It is important to understand them, identify their pain points. As Carlos mentioned earlier, identify their customer journey, and from that you can come up with certain hypotheses and certain ideas that will, you will be able to measure in the succeeding iterations that you would have. Third is that always remember that data is always your friend. So in every iteration, it's always it's very important to validate your iterations, validate everything that you are testing with data, because your stakeholders might have emotional attachment. Like, let's say, oh, I want a digital wallet. But if your data shows otherwise, it's your number one proof that, hey, we validated that this is not what we need, or in the other case, this is what we actually need. So it is very important to use data and validate early assumptions and succeeding iterations through data-driven learnings. And lastly, I guess this is equally important as the other 4 points. Don't be afraid to say no, but remember to be diplomatic, logical, and empirical on how you deliver it and how you present your findings to your different stakeholders. Okay, before I end, I'd like to share this quote from Bill Gates. So Bill Gates once said that your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. Again, by identifying these pain points from your customers, by getting feedback from them, and testing out different solutions that you can provide to them, you are able to achieve the goal. And yeah, you're able to iterate towards better development of your product going forward. Yeah, so yeah, I think that ends my presentation. I'm not sure if that was lightning enough, but yeah, thank you for listening.
Right.
And don't forget to build, measure, and learn, communicate that as well.
All right. Thanks for that, John.